The LinkedIn Podcast Network is sponsored by TIAA. TIAA makes you a retirement promise, a promise of a guaranteed retirement paycheck for life. Learn more at TIAA.org/promises pay off.
LinkedIn presents.
Happy Friday, people. This is the Next Big Idea Daily. I'm your host, Michael Kovnat. So how do you feel about capitalism? Is it the best economic system on offer? A more or less fair exchange between free individuals and a free market? Or is it an inherently rigged and exploitative enterprise, driving vast inequalities and environmental devastation? Well, here to weigh in with one perspective is journalist Grace Blakeley, author of the new book, Vulture, Capitalism, Corporate Crimes, Backdoor Bailouts, and the Death of Freedom. Grace's writing has appeared in outlets like Tribune and The New Statesman, and she's written several books on economics. Here she is to share 5 big ideas from her latest.
Most of us have been taught to think that capitalism means the same as free markets, where small firms compete with one another to produce goods and services as efficiently as possible. And free markets are supposed to guarantee, well, freedom. But capitalist markets aren't really free. Modern economies are dominated by a number of extremely large and powerful corporations that cooperate with one another as much as they compete. Many of these businesses are so big that they are able to dominate their entire industry, meaning consumers don't have as much choice and workers have much less bargaining power. Big businesses have been capturing a much greater share of the economic pie for many decades now, and rather than investing in research and development or sharing the spoils with their workers, these companies have opted to dish out billions of dollars to shareholders. The end result is an economy characterized by high inequality, low investment, and lower productivity. Big businesses and states are on the same team. You might think that it's the state's job to deal with the problem of monopolies and oligopolies. Many progressives, and even some libertarians, argue that government should be taking a much stricter approach to enforcing competition. Some have even called for a breakup of the big tech companies. There's just one problem with this analysis. Governments and businesses are on the same team. The state is not a neutral player in the economy. Instead, policy outcomes are influenced by the balance of power within society. So, when big corporations dominate the economy, they're also able to dominate the policy-making process, whether through lobbying politicians, influencing the debate in the media, or simply threatening to leave if they don't get their way. But it's not just that big businesses are buying off individual politicians. The line between the public and private sectors has become much more blurred over time. Huge multinational corporations like Boeing are deeply imbricated in the US's military-industrial complex. The company doesn't just get billions of dollars worth of government contracts, it also receives vast sums of corporate welfare from a government that needs it to continue operating. And Boeing is equally dependent on the American state, as became very clear during the COVID-19 pandemic when the company received a huge bailout. All this means that when Boeing commits horrendous crimes, it is never held to account, because Boeing and the US state are on the same team. Capitalist economies are planned economies. Most people think of central planning and capitalism as opposites. In the old command and control economy of the USSR, the state controlled everything, and the system was incredibly inefficient as a result. But in the US, the free market determines the production and allocation of resources, which promotes both freedom and efficiency. You can only have central planning under communism, so the argument goes. In fact, capitalist economies are also planned economies, but this planning is hidden in plain sight. Big businesses are sufficiently insulated from competition that they can make decisions about what to produce without worrying about what the market is telling them to do. And within these corporations, decisions are made through a rigid hierarchy that allows managers to exercise immense control over their workers. Financial institutions are also often large and powerful enough to ignore market signals and instead invest on the basis of personal relationships or political capital. Big asset managers like BlackRock own significant stakes in almost every large publicly traded company, giving them immense power over the economy as a whole. And capitalist states work alongside big businesses and financial institutions to make sure the economy benefits them. Just look at the bailouts from the financial crisis or the COVID-19 pandemic. During every crisis, which are supposed to be times of creative destruction in free market economies, governments step in to bail out the strong and impose costs on the weak. Capitalist planning undermines democracy. When big businesses, financial institutions, and governments are able to work together to plan who gets what, it undermines our democracy. Big businesses and banks are able to make decisions about investment, wages, and production that affect everyone, yet they do so without any democratic accountability. We're told that the market acts as a counterweight to their power, but these institutions are often powerful enough to override the diktats of the market and do exactly what they want. And while capitalist states are supposed to be democratic, most of the time politicians ignore the interests of the vast majority of people and instead focus on providing handouts to the already wealthy and powerful. Our democracies are characterized by rampant corruption, and there's very little the average citizen can do to stop it. That is why trust in democracy has fallen to such low levels in recent years. People have watched while successive governments, of all different political colours, have dished out cash to the rich, while everyone else has been faced with lower wages and higher prices. It doesn't have to be this way. Throughout history, there are thousands of examples of ordinary people coming together to take on the interests of the powerful few and take back control of the economy and society for the many. In the 1970s, workers at Lucas Aerospace developed a plan to transform the struggling business from a weapons manufacturer into a democratically owned and run British producer of socially useful technologies, like wind turbines and kidney dialysis machines. In the 1990s, the participatory budgeting movement emerged in Brazil, where ordinary people were given control of the municipal budget and used it to invest in health, education, and resources for their communities. In Jackson, Mississippi, ordinary citizens came together to establish Cooperation Jackson, a network of cooperative enterprises that provides work and resources to members of the community and helps them to organize to elect progressive leaders to the municipal government. If we want to fix all the major problems afflicting our societies today, from climate breakdown to inequality to the erosion of democracy, we need to demand change. And that means we have to get organized. We live in extremely individualistic societies, in which we're all taught to believe that we're competing against each other for scarce resources. But when you're competing with your fellow workers, rather than cooperating, you're easier to exploit. 40 years ago, if you couldn't afford to put food on the table, you'd talk to your fellow workers and organize to demand your boss pay you a fair wage. Today, you're more likely to take out a high-interest payday loan and think of yourself as a failure. And when you blame yourself in this way, your boss gets to walk away with higher profits, and politicians don't have to worry about citizens organizing for change. Instead of individualistic societies, we need to build collectivist ones. We need to work together in our communities, in our workplaces, and on the streets to demand change.
Okay, thank you, Grace. And thanks for listening, everyone. That does it for us this week. These episodes were written by me and edited by Caleb Bissinger. The Next Big Idea Daily is part of the LinkedIn Podcast Network. I'll be back Monday with a fresh batch of new ideas. Hope to see you then.